I'm curious about the contrast or the blend between theater, which to me sounds like lines, and songs have.
There's things already in place, to, our point when we talk about level 4, we'll get that a lot. Well, level 4 is hard to measure. You probably are actually measuring, when we talk leading indicators, someone is probably measuring it. You just need to understand who to go to or who to ask to find if that's being measured, right? Hey everyone, it's Vanessa and Jim back with the Kirkpatrick Podcast. Hey Jim, how are you doing?
I got a little scratchy throat, but other than that, I'm fit as a fiddle.
Nice. Great. I'm so glad to see you again. And really quick, before we get started, we wanted to give a big update from the Kirkpatricks. So first things first, we have officially launched our new website. So there is all of our branding is updated on the website. All of our programs are on the website. The only thing I wanted to mention, if you were already part of our website, you may need to reset your password when you first log in, but otherwise you will still have access to everything that was there. It's just a refreshed brand and easier access to all of our services and offerings. The second thing is right now we are in the middle of government year-end deals and savings. So we've got discounts on certification programs, consulting, impact studies, curriculum design. So make sure you visit our website for all of the details or reach out to us so we can make sure that you get those really sweet year-end deals and savings. And then as a reminder, we are on the GSA schedule. So if you need to buy from us and you want to make it easy peasy, lemon squeezy, get over to that GSA schedule and you can purchase our programs, our workshops, access to staff augmentation resources, evaluations, impact studies. All of the things are there on the schedule to make it easy for you to purchase. And finally, you know that I loved the in-person experience and we wanted to make sure we brought that back. So this September 4th through 6th, we are back in Dulles, Virginia to get certified with us in person again. And this is a very special certification because usually our certifications when you're in person is 2 days. And you go through the program and you work on your blended evaluation plan on your own. However, this time in person on the last day, you will actually be working with the Kirkpatrick team in order to work on your blended evaluation plan on that last day. If you're in the bronze program and if you're in the silver program, you'll be continuing the learning and workshopping, data analysis and collection and presentation of your final reports and findings. So it's a really immersive workshop experience that is unlike any other program that we put out there. But that's enough about all of the updates, but there were a lot. So we wanted to make sure that you have that. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Lindsey Coates was one of our speakers at the summit, and we had such an amazing time with her. We had to bring her back so you all got to hear her very unique story. Lindsey Coates is a CPTD, and she's a learning and development professional with a background in adult learning, quality assurance, and leadership. She comes from a musical theater background and believes that training should not only promote retention and help businesses achieve strategic outcomes, but should also be entertaining. She brings a sense of performance to learning, hence why she says she's in the business of entertainment. Lindsey designs and develops feasible learning solutions to meet business needs while promoting a safe, inclusive environment for learners. Lindsey, welcome back to the Kirkpatricks and welcome to the Kirkpatrick Podcast. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. So excited to be here. And I mentioned that this is the jacket I wore at the summit, so I figured I would test it out on the podcast.
Well, it looks beautiful. Love it. My favorite color.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your background in musical theater and how it influeensed your transition into the field of learning and development?
Yeah, absolutely. So in high school, I was in musical theater. So in all just regular theater and musical theater, absolutely loved it. And then I continued in college. So I was initially a theater major in college and took a lot of classes in improv and actual like technical theater, backstage stuff type of stuff. And then in order to get me through college, my job was actually working in entertainment at Tampa Bay Busch Gardens. So I was quite a few characters at Busch Gardens, and that's That was one of my probably most fun jobs, honestly. I worked at their Hollow Scream event, and scaring people is, I don't know, there's like a certain joy in it. It's kind of fun. And I was also an elf in their Christmas Town event. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, so that was my most long-lived character, Chili the elf.
Huh.
She was fun to play, but when I was also in college and working in entertainment, I had an internship at the first company I ended up starting my career at. And I realized that there was just such a huge connection between being on stage and putting on a performance and training people. And my first mentor was basically like the corporate trainer at the company. And he kind of recognized that as a strength of mine and started talking to me about, training and instructional design. And I didn't even know that was really a thing. Like, I didn't really know that that was a job. And it kind of sounded perfect for me because I knew I didn't want to be like on Broadway, and really go for the whole musical thing, but I just saw such a connection in putting on performance and being able to train people and create kind of that emotional, beautiful space that is theater.
That's incredible. One of the things that I love so much about Jim is his ability to tell a story and really bring in that emotion. You feel like you're in the story, right? Like you're experiencing and feeling it. Jim, do you have a musical theater background I don't know about?
I feel like I'm putting on a play a lot of times in my life.
I think so
A
too.
lot of it's improv. You know
Yes.
that we do that a lot. Here behind the scenes, don't we, Vanessa? And I'm curious about the contrast or the blend between theater, which to me sounds like lines and songs have certain words you must sing, and improv.
Mm.
Yeah, that's interesting because in class, especially if it's like instructor-led training, whether it's virtual or in person, you have kind of like your script, right? You have your facilitator guide, your materials, and because you've done it so many times, you tend to memorize some stuff. And like my background in memorizing lines, that has really helped me, but as we all know, things just tend to go wrong sometimes in class, especially in a virtual room. Like technology, your troubleshooting stuff. And so I rely on my improv skills all the time to just be able to pivot, and say, okay, well, we were going to do this and now we're doing this, and just keeping the show going, like the show must go on. And so it's always back and forth of this is the script, but this is what we're doing now.
Lindsey, I do that a lot of times too, but oftentimes what it is in case something, instead of something going wrong, something comes up from the group, from the trainees, and it's just like a gift, that say, oh my goodness, this is something that is worth not exploiting so much, but as using as a teaching method to everybody else. And that seems to go well. And said, wait a minute, Lindsey, I heard you say something about improv, didn't you? I want to hear more about that. And it's pivoting with that because there's a golden opportunity to have people in the audience shine rather than, it's a prompt for me to do my show a little bit different. And I'm not saying you do that because I have a feeling you do both ways.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because with adults, you want to make sure that you can call on their own experience and have it be as much like a self-directed learning as possible. And so if they bring in, like you said, it is a gift for a moment, you're like, oh, you know what? Let's go off book for a moment and let's dive deeper into that because that is a great scenario that we can unpack, or, that's a really great piece of information that you brought up. Let's discuss that further. And that's so valuable for adult learning, making sure that they feel involved and that their experience matters and that their expertise matters. So yeah, I can absolutely relate to that.
Well, I'm glad you can, because I think my opinion is that most trainers won't do that because it takes some courage. it takes not knowing exactly where it's going to go. My dad would always say, don't open it up to this audience because you never know where they're going to go.
This is true.
But
you don't know.
But you after a while, I think people like you and me and Vanessa can sense that genuineness doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be scripted. And I think people can relax a little bit. And I try and do that early so they know this isn't just a show that this trainer's putting on, but this is an experience where we are human and we can learn from each other. But I just think it's a very rare technique that people use.
Sounds like a lot of monitoring and adjusting.
Oh, interesting words you choose.
Yeah,
Vanessa.
look at that connection.
Just over here, monitoring and adjusting our outline for this podcast. No, but honestly, I mean, that's truly, I think when we, we'll go into a little bit of the model in a minute, but I think when we talk about what is that big gold box around level 3 and 4, this is what we're talking about, right? Things may go out into the world and your employees are going to go out and sit back into their work environments, and things may change and shift, right? People change jobs, they get new managers, culture shifts or culture changes, and you have to be ready to help support and figure it out in the moment. And that's where improv is such an interesting skill that actually a lot of instructional designers, and I say a lot of the instructional designers in the circles in which I surround myself with do some improv classes for that reason exactly that you're sharing. It's all about being able to monitor and adjust on the fly and taking what we're learning in the world and applying it to our work, because it doesn't all have to be separate. To that point, you coined this term train. Wait, okay, hold on. Hold on. It took me a year and a half to be able to say sesquicentennial. So I'm going to be able to do. I'm going to be able to do this. Okay, it may take me a year and a half. Okay, entertainment. Tell me more about what inspired you, and how you're using it today.
So I have to give credit where it's due. I don't want to say that I coined it. It was actually one of my mentees. Her name was Jody, and she used to be, I think she did like Zumba instructional classes before. And, she used to talk to me about, because I was mentoring her more in like instructional design. And she talked about training a show, and she talked to me about that. And we both agreed like, oh yeah, it needs to be entertaining. And I think she was one that's like, yeah, like entertainment. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And since then I've used that word. And I think that, and especially with virtual training, it can be very boring. It can drag on, and unless people are engaged and interested in the topic at hand, unless, like I said, they can feel they self-direct a little bit and can call on their own experience, you're going to lose your learner, and the retention and the transfer of the knowledge is not going to happen. And so I try to make it as much as a show and entertaining as possible, because just like, I don't know, if you think about a show, unless you capture their attention, you're going to switch, like before, I'm going to switch the channel. Like that doesn't happen anymore, but you can probably pick a new show on Netflix or something, right? So it's just about balancing, ensuring that you're giving them opportunities to practice and, learn the skills, but that it's entertaining at the same time, because we need to keep their attention.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that. I literally just before this call got off of a call with an organization, and they asked, it's compliance training. They asked for it to be fun. We gave them a comic book situation, and they're like, well, we're actually talking about something really serious, so we need to tone down the language. And I'm like, well, we're not actually talking about death here, right? We're talking to other humans, and the tone of what we're speaking to is, being able to speak the language of the other person that we're talking to, which is, another thing that Jim talks about all the time, right? Speaking the language of the business, speaking the language of your learners. If you It's also in the scripting, right? Like our programs have scripts, our facilitators, and I'm looking at you, Jim, should not be going off script too much. But, but also I tell them, you have to put it in your own words, right? It's written with a certain phrasing and perspective. You have to review that and say, okay, I may not use this phrase. I may use, you know what I mean? Or I'm going to pull my personal experience here and here. And that's how you're able to connect with others, right? And also know that depending on the organization, the person in front of you, you may have to shift your language, right? Do you find yourself doing any of that depending of the stakeholder that you're in front of?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting that you mentioned compliance training because at Humana, we are a highly regulated industry, right? Insurance, and we are contracted by CMS. So we are always having to include some type of compliance, ethics training. And it's funny, the last class that I taught, I was like, okay, day 4, we're going to talk about compliance. And it was just like, like the whole room was like, great. And I was like, no, trust me, it's fun. It's fun. I promise. Like, it's not what you expect. And I love that you brought up comic book because I did something similar. I used characters, which is another, like kind of drawing back from my theater days. I created a video series with like a lead character. I named him Paul Wrong. And he basically shows kind of a person who's not really maintaining compliance, and we just use the video series to kind of spark discussion and then allow them to find the answers on their own. So it's a great way, like you said, it's tailoring your modality as well as your language, because I typically work in a sales environment, and salespeople, especially in insurance, like they have to do CEs every year. They're used to taking exams every year, and they get bored with it, right? They don't want to do more training. They don't want to do more compliance. And so I had to think of how can I capture their attention and keep it and make sure that we do go over something that's very important. This protects our patients, this protects our business and mitigates risk. So it's vital. But how do I make sure that, one, it keeps their attention, but 2, it's memorable? Because we have to make sure that they remember these compliance rules and they're applying them in the field, right? When they maybe don't have access to their training materials at the time. So I made it a video series where they can kind of connect to a character, and maybe like at minimum, they maybe don't remember the exact compliance rule, but they remember Paul doing it wrong. And they think to themselves when they're out in the field, like, okay, I don't want to be like Paul. What did he do in the video? How can I make sure that I don't do that? And let me go check my resources. That was my main goal. So it's really just about tailoring it to your audience to ensure that they'll remember it.
Yeah. It's translating the classroom into the on-the-job behavior, which is really where the behavior change has to happen, right? You have to create opportunities for them to remember. Now, I love to hear from folks how they came across the Kirkpatrick model. Like, what is your Kirkpatrick model story?
That's a good question. So I remember, like I said, my first mentor, when I worked for a company before Humana, he talked to me about like instructional design models and evaluation, and he mentioned Kirkpatrick. And I kind of was, I guess, using it, but didn't have the language before, because I was in a dual role where I was doing training and, learning and development, but also quality assurance because I was in a call center environment. So I really was using the model, but not knowing it, because I would train something up front and then I would monitor the behavior while listening to the calls, and doing quality checks. And then I would adjust, of course, and try to make actual behavior change happen, which leads to the business results of, less handle time and more satisfied customers. So I really was doing it. And then I kind of discovered it as I was learning more about just instructional design. through my mentor. And so it really gave me kind of the language and the credibility to show value of my work. And that's how it started. And then I really started using it more once I moved to Humana, because at Humana, again, I've always been in quality assurance or a learning role. And it's allowed me to, like I said, really show the value of my work and show that it is effective in making genuine business outcomes. And that has helped me to advance, very quickly, when historically, and like really large companies, it's kind of a sad truth, but sometimes training team is usually like the first one that it gets cut, right? It's seen as a cost center. And so I have been able to advance very quickly and move to kind of have a bigger scope of influence in a large company because I've been using this model and been able to show actual measurable results.
I'd like to do something here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking up on what you two are saying, just sitting back, and I'm hearing you talk about improv. You want people to remember things. And Vanessa, I'm pretty sure I heard you use level 3 and level 4 in the same sentence, like right together. So what I did yesterday, I think kind of summarizes what I heard you two describing. That was Jordan, another person on our team, and I were working with a Navy group out of Norfolk, Virginia, and we're trying to get across level 3 is not separate from level 4. Mm-hmm. I think most of the world thinks it is. You do a level 3 with a 90-day survey, and level 4, well, you just hope to find something that is a difference maker. So one of the people in there, her name was Elaine, was telling us a brief story about something that their unit did, to try and create more excitement in the training, more understanding, and there was my moment, because she was kind of excited about what they did. They did some technique, and I said, "Tell us more about that." So she was explaining that their level 3, explain their level 3. I said, "How did that go over?" All of a sudden, she blossomed. She said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it." I said, "Try me." And it was a whole new energy level. She was talking about how others responded, how senior leaders responded. They said, "Can you come and do this?" Now they're calling them more often rather than Elaine's team waiting for the phone to ring. And I said, you just explained to us beautifully in a story that level 3 is not separate from level 4. What you did was level 3, and how the others responded almost immediately was level 4. Everybody got all excited about that. And I think that, Lindsey, you're right. They will remember the story. They won't remember the principle that we had on a slide on the mm-hmm. screen saying level 3 and level 4 are connected. I think it just added the heart. And I'm with you. I think people remember emotional experiences more than they remember intellectual experiences. Can you relate to that, either of you?
Yes, that's actually something I had in my presentation at the summit. I took a master class with Beyond at one point. They put on really great master classes, by the way, and they're also into characters, right? They're video editing. And Dr. Jennifer Acker was in the presentation and talked about storytelling and just exactly what you talked about, like the heart. And she shared that in presentations, if you use this formula, like the equation that she had, it can be 22 times more memorable for your audience. And the formula, whoa. Yeah, right? It blew me away. So the formula was starting with story, then sharing data, and then driving it home with your point of view or your main point. And so starting with capturing the emotion and making people feel something rather than starting out with your data and your testimony. Like a lot of people think that's how they can immediately build credibility, like, let me share these amazing statistics and data. But it's going to be more memorable because of the way that you made them feel and captured them immediately.
22 times?
22 times more memorable. Yep, I remember that.
That's incredible. I mean, it actually kind of sounds like, Jim, your formula of, how I've seen you do a lot of your keynotes, it's always opening with a story, providing some of that data and insights, right? And the key learning, and then just continuing that sort of, formula. Now that I'm giving the trade secrets away, welcome everybody. But to your point, that's really, I think we have an assumption that people just want to see the data, and they want to see the numbers. And I think to Jim's point, that's why a lot of people do the 90-day survey, right? Because then they can send out the survey tool will provide them with data, and that's what they can give. But what ends up being more powerful often is what's in the qualitative, and what's in the interviews, what's in those surveys, what's in the observations. So you can have those stories to actually open with and then say, and now here is the data that we're seeing to back the stories.
Blend them together. Oh, yes.
Yeah. We love blending here.
Yeah. I absolutely relate to like what you said of the qualitative data being so important. And like the project that I presented at the summit was about reducing complaints and how I use kind of theater techniques. And I remember there was a moment when I was like, okay, that's my level 3. It's starting to happen. Like behavior's changing, because one of my agents, I was a call quality manager at the time, and she came to my desk. She was on the phone and she was like, okay, I don't want to get a complaint. I don't want this to happen. This is what's going on. Can you help me through this call? And that had never happened before. Like I was blown away, because I was like, okay, she cares. She is making sure that she can change her behavior and apply what she learned in the training to try to mitigate risk and to try to mitigate a complaint, which really heavily affects our bottom line. And so I started seeing it after that day. And then I started, seeing the data in our call listening, and seeing the data come together with that. And I remember that moment and feeling very excited in that moment.
Hey, Lindsey, can I shift gears just a little bit here? I'm pretty sure I heard Vanessa say that you were involved with quality assurance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't say quality hope or quality desire or quality maybe, does it? It says quality assurance. That's a very strong word. Can you give us a couple tips on how you and your work can help assure that quality takes place?
That is a good question. It's funny because at Humana, we call it call quality. But it is, quality assurance. So the way that we assure it is to provide a lot of performance support in the form of, whether that be documentation. So we always have some type of like knowledge center that people can use on the job, like while they're on the phone. Because when you're on the phone with a customer, like there is a sense of urgency, right? Like you can't take your time finding an answer. So there has to be support in the form of like documentation. And then there's also support from listening to calls and coaching behaviors. So we always provide follow-up coaching, and we share in team meetings, we would always share call quality trends and say, this is what's happening across the organization. This is our plan to try and make a change to that. And it's being also cheerleaders. It's really changing the brand of quality assurance. I think that was always a goal for me, because people see quality assurance as kind of like the compliance cops, I guess, or like the auditors, they really don't like them a lot of times. And I wanted to change that narrative of like, we're not here to catch you in the act or, get you in trouble. We are really here for success and to assure that we are putting out quality products and mitigating risk to the business, because that helps everybody.
But Lindsey, that's more for children, isn't it? Because adults, if you tell them and teach them how to do something, surely as being responsible adults, they will do it without needing any additional guidance.
Well, if you look at human behavior principles, there has to be a few other things in place, right? There has to be process. There has to be motivation, which is huge for salespeople. Because the motivation generally is the compensation, right? Like in sales, it's the hunger for, okay, I want to get a good bonus check. And that's fair, right? So quality assurance, we had to ensure that there was enough motivation for them to do that. And so quality assurance and reducing complaints was part of their compensation planning as well
Very
as their
good.
performance reviews, because I was like, look, people are not going to care unless there's some level of motivation. Like we can't change behavior and expect it to stick unless there is sufficient motivation for it.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Although, would there ever be times that you did catch someone in the act in the right way and share more of that story or that kudos to them because they did something really well?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that's also part of motivation, and like making sure that you recognize the behavior, because some people are motivated by, money, but also some people are motivated by recognition and reward. They want that star at the end of the day. I mean, that's me. Like I want the sticker on the forehead at the end of the day. Like I want to be recognized. So to me, we tried to recognize in a lot of different ways. Of course we would send out email blasts and stuff, but a lot of times I would, especially when like during the pandemic and when we all switched from an actual in-person call center to working at home, like we needed connection. So I would do incentives and competitions. And if people were, doing the right behaviors and we caught them in the act, we would do like spiffs and stuff around that. And I sent funny videos of myself, like, all right, these are all the winners. And I would spin a wheel and pick it out of the hat. And this is the winner, and that was fun for people. They craved that connection, especially during that time, like I said, the height of the pandemic. And so, yeah, absolutely. Recognizing people doing what's right. That is a helpful motivator to continue that level 3 and lead to the level 4.
Lindsey, so many people I hear say, we really can't do level 3 because it takes too much effort. Well, you know how much effort it takes to develop and deliver a training program, a whole lot. How much effort does it take to just point out or have managers point out publicly, hey, this team over here, good job. So I don't ever buy that. They say level 3 is too expensive. How expensive is a sticker on a forehead?
Right.
Compared to 6 months of instructional design and development.
Yeah, absolutely. And a tip, like I just found that making sure that your learning team, if you happen to have a quality team or a quality assurance team, like they should be besties, okay? Because they can help each other out, right? I mean, like what quality is hearing and observing and monitoring, that has to be brought back to your training team, and then vice versa. So I've always been in a kind of like a privileged place in that, where I kind of have been in both camps, and that has helped me be successful in that and show that level 3 is not difficult. There are things in place that you just have to harness.
I love that. There's things already in place, to, our point when we talk about level 4, we'll get that a lot. Well, level 4 is hard to measure. You probably are actually measuring, when we talk leading indicators, someone is probably measuring it. You just need to understand who to go to or who to ask to find if that's being measured, right? I think the same thing to your point with level 3, for a lot of organizations, these, we're talking about interviews or observations in particular, right? It's really what we're talking about here is observations. Those are probably happening in some way in a lot of organizations. And it's just up to you to maybe think outside of your box and who can I go and partner with to have those conversations, maybe check out some of those observations, listen to some of those calls myself. There is nothing for me as a designer more effective than being able to listen, to observe, to hear from the people. When I worked with pharma reps, I would do ride-alongs. I loved it. But nothing better than to actually see them in their day, to then bring back and say, you know what, actually, one, here are some things that we need to update, but maybe we actually don't need to update these things. We need to actually be working on these performance support items, right? So whether it is developing that recognition program, or doing a monthly lunch and learn and providing some additional opportunities instead of doing redoing something from scratch, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, essentially.
Right.
Hey, Lindsey, I'm just curious. If Vanessa ever someday wanted to have a second career, what would the chances be that she could be on the stage?
I think it's a great chance, honestly.
She's on the stage. She seems just in real life to me, the way she,
I mean,
the energy and
the
never
Bravo
holding
TV
still.
stage, Real Housewives.
Yeah, I mean,
Jim.
I've seen you command a stage too. Like you command a presence,
Yeah.
and so I absolutely believe it could be a second career, a little on the side gig,
Just,
even
you
if
know
it's,
what?
You do that.
voiceovers.
She does that on
I
the
used
side,
to do
by the way.
voiceover.
I know she does.
Really? Yeah.
I used to do voiceovers for one of my companies. You want to know what they said? My very, probably my very first voiceover, I made someone want to drive into oncoming traffic because I was so slow because the tool we were using was not very conducive to what we were trying to do. So I had to speak super slowly to give the video person time to do the action. Yeah, they said they wanted to drive into oncoming traffic. So
That's
I got a lot better. People were
That's a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, there's one more thing that I want to touch on from your bio that I think is important because I think that there is a piece of this that we have to talk about when we're talking about observation. People don't love observation for all the reasons that we just said, right? It doesn't feel safe. They feel like there's retribution. You particularly called out creating safe and inclusive environments for really, I mean, you say learners, I say employees, right? You're creating the safe and inclusive environment for people to behave in which they normally behave at work. What are some of the strategies you do to let them know this is not, I'm trying like a gotcha sort of situation. I want to support you and I want you to show up as yourself so that we can adjust where needed.
That's a good question. So I think what I mentioned before, so much of it is changing the narrative and the branding of the team because historically, like a team that I had come into, they weren't well liked and it was seen as the gotcha team. And it could be, a lot of times like quality assurance, they're like that phantom team that you never meet, you never see. You get the email in the inbox that says you've been evaluated, or you have this audit. And you're like, well, who is this from? And that was my first goal coming into this team was like, people will know who we are and we will know who they are. And so my first couple of months was just heavy observation of getting to know people and building rapport and letting them know that this observation is coming from a human, right? This is coming from Lindsey, who is there for your success. And so it was reiterating that narrative all the time and building things like those recognition programs to really show, okay, I am here for your success and I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. It's also making them like using the power of storytelling to make them care about why they need to do quality. Like, why does quality matter? And so like for us in insurance world, quality means ensuring that you provide a quality sale. So you're providing someone a plan that meets their needs, right? That they're not going to complain about later or not going to have issues with later. And so it's making people care about who you are talking to on the phone, like storytelling. And I would read out complaints and say, this is your grandmother that is having issues with her medications now because she's on this Humana plan, or this is your mother or your father who is going to their pharmacy and now having issues because of their new insurance plan. So it's exactly like what you talked about, Jim. It's getting to the heart and making people understand the why and making them feel like a part of something bigger than themselves, like understanding the real purpose. And that helps them it provides that safe space where they're like, okay, this is something bigger than me. Like, I need to come forward. I feel like I made a mistake in this call. How can I make it better? So people would come to my desk and say, hey, like, I just had a rough call. I really don't know what happened. And I was like, I would thank them, like, thank you so much for coming forward with this. Like, we can make this better. Like, what can we do together? We're going to make a strategic plan so that this doesn't happen again. And we're going to make it right for the consumer. So it was never retribution. It was always thanking them for that sense of accountability because this is bigger than all of us.
That's incredible. Thank you, Lindsey. Lindsey, where can our listeners connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Please add me on LinkedIn. I love to talk to people and network with new folks, so absolutely connect with me there.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate you coming today to the podcast for the insights you shared with us at the summit. It was a great presentation. Jim, she even did a little singing.
Yeah.
She had a little performance herself. And we look forward to continue watching your journey, learning more from you. Friends, thank you so much for participating in today's podcast. Let us know if you're integrating any sort of performance techniques in your own organization and your own work. We'd love to hear all about that. And also, if you all are partnering with quality assurance teams, if not, let's talk about a strategy of how you can do that.
Well, good.
Yes. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will catch you all in the next podcast. Bye.